stop the music already.
I say we, yeah, I want to come right to the sidewalk. You go to Heinz.
Tony?
How are you?
Right on, Tony.
No.
Hey, you can't make good side.
Hey, Tony.
How's it going, guys?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to downtown Pittston. I'm sure I'm not the only one who felt how great that was to hear Pachi's band echoing through the canyon of downtown Pittston once again. We certainly enjoyed that. It was reminiscent of the days when that procession used to start after Mass at St. Rocco. So, to Pachi's band, welcome, and thank you for being here this morning. My name is Mike Lombardo. I'm a councilman here in the city of Pittston, and I'm proud to stand up here on this stage today for this wonderful occasion, the rededication of our Christopher Columbus statue here in downtown Pittston. And I thank you all for joining us. You really do represent the best of America standing here before me. I'm so happy to see everyone here today. In keeping with that spirit, I'm going to call on Pachi's band now to start us off with the playing of our national anthem. The first part of our program is, of course, the invocation. Unfortunately, we don't have a member of the clergy with us today, so what I would like to do is I'd like to ask everyone to say a silent prayer, and I'd like you to particularly remember the tragedy of Las Vegas that happened this past week. Remember our fellow Americans who lost their lives, and say a silent prayer to yourself at this time for the next few moments. Thank you. First, let me start off by introducing some of the dignitaries and elected officials that are here with us today. But before I do that, allow me to thank all of the wonderful Italian-American societies that have gathered here today for this special occasion. All of the Italian societies and groups are represented, along with our friends from the Greater Pittston Friendly Sons are also here. So we certainly thank you for coming out and sharing all of our shared culture, our shared experience as immigrants, as our forefathers came to this country. It's certainly wonderful to see you all here today. Up here on the stage with me, first over here to my left, our Judge Agello, who is always very instrumental in organizing the Columbus Day festivities. We have former council member here in the city of Pittston, Maria Caparella Montanti, along with her husband Chet. One of the more spirited members of our community and always willing to help with many community groups here in the city. Ms. Letteretti, the president of the Italian-American Association in Luzerne County, also a very instrumental group in terms of recognizing the Columbus Day holiday and the festivities here at the Columbus statue in particular. Over my right shoulder, my fellow council member and someone who was instrumental in making today's program possible, Councilman Dan Argo. Dan. Over here to the right, on the rightmost portion of the stage, my right, your left, we have our Mayor, Jason Klush. Mayor Klush. To the Mayor's left, many of you will know and recognize Mr. Pat Solano, who was instrumental in this statue being placed here back in 1969. You're going to hear from him later in the program. And one of the most helpful persons to the city of Pittston, our state representative, Mr. Michael Carroll. Some of our other elected officials are scattered throughout the crowd. I know Councilman Ken Bangs is here, over here to my left. And Councilman Joe McLean. And one of our longest serving city officials, the Controller, Chris Latona. And of course, our city treasurer right next to Chris, Kathy Kennard. Kathy, thanks for being here today. And former Mayor Mike Lombardo is also here, and Mike was very helpful in terms of coordinating the reinstallation of the statue. In fact, if I could point out, most of you probably noticed as you passed by the statue over the course of the past few weeks since it's been reinstalled, what we've done is raised it up so it's more of a position of prominence. The base is much higher than where it was initially installed, so it gives the statue a much more prominent place here in this place of honor here in South Pittston. So we're very happy about that. The statue really looks beautiful. Our Department of Public Works members are here. Some of them are here gathered with us today that we're working right up until the last minute to make the statue and the surrounding area very beautiful. I know Bruce is out there somewhere, I'm sure. So we thank him. And our special events coordinator, Sarah Donahue is here, and she helped us with organizing our procession. Of course, she does such a good job with the St. Patrick's Day Parade, so we're glad that she helped us with our small parade. A couple other people I want to mention briefly in terms of helping with this event. What we try to do here in the city of Pittston, when we're having these events, we don't like to burden the taxpayer with the cost. We've had a number of very generous benefactors that have helped underwrite the cost of today's program. I'd like to recognize Medico Industries and our friends at Unico. President John Teran, I know, is here. They've made a very substantial donation to today's festivity to help us get it off the ground and not burden our taxpayers. So I know John is here. John, thank you. I very much appreciate it. I'd also like to especially recognize Mr. Julio Caprari from the Knights. He was also very helpful in terms of coordinating many of the day's festivities and making sure that we have our wonderful Knights of Columbus here who are so graciously providing us with an honor guard. Everyone looks great. We really appreciate the color guard today. Thank you, gentlemen. And Ginger Murphy is here. I also appreciate her help in terms of coordinating some of the other donations that we secured that allowed us to do this beautiful ceremony. So, Ginger, thank you. Appreciate the help. And last but certainly not least, Councilman Argo. Those of you who know Danny know that the Columbus statue, and more particular our shared Italian-American culture and history, is something that's very important to Danny. So you'll hear from Danny later, and I'm sure he'll express to you how important it is to him and to all of us gathered here. So Dan, thank you. I don't want to belabor the point, but obviously Columbus Day over the course of the past several years, it just seems to be under attack. So it certainly warms my heart, and I'm sure all of you today, to come here and celebrate the true meaning of Columbus Day, and to really fight those notions of what it's been turned into over the course of the past several years. It's interesting, as I was preparing for today, my dad dug out a paper that I wrote when I was in college many years ago about this exact topic. So those many years ago, this is something that was in the forefront of our minds, but in our crazy times, it seems as though it's even more so come to the forefront today. And it's unfortunate because it seems as though Christopher Columbus has kind of become a lightning rod for the bad points of the human condition. And instead of looking at the human condition, I call upon everyone to look at the human spirit. The human condition is flawed. All of us have flaws. Everyone has flaws, and it's unfair to judge a man by today's mores and today's morals for something that he did 500 some years ago. So rather than looking at the flaws of Christopher Columbus, the flaws in the human condition, I suggest that the most important thing is to look at the human spirit and what his journey represented. You know, when Christopher Columbus set sail, there was a belief and there was this notion that the earth wasn't flat, but the fact of the matter is, he is the first one to test that theory. And it was a very courageous thing to do, to sail into the unknown and do what he did. And the reality is, that journey was trailblazing. And for most of you, like myself, we haven't been in this country that long. Most of us here are probably second, at the most third or fourth generation. He blazed the trail for our forefathers to come here, to open up this civilization. And when I spoke about the human spirit, what better representation of it do we have than the success that's been the United States of America? So many developments, so many advancements in humankind are made possible by that journey, the door that was opened by Christopher Columbus, that allowed all of these different shared cultures to come here and to thrive and to build this beautiful country that we have here today. So I call upon all of us to celebrate the journey of Columbus, celebrate the name of Columbus, and continue to hold this day near and dear to our hearts. You know, in this day and age, one of the things that I think is prevalent is that we have this sort of superficial activism. People go on Facebook and they put their positions on there and they call for thoughts and prayers and things of that nature, things that aren't meaningful. I think that one thing that we can do, if you want to achieve real change in society, real change in culture, you want to make things happen, don't be superficial. Do something about it. Join groups, as all of you have here today. Celebrate our culture. Do community service. Work. Do good things in your community. Don't just complain. And I think that the audience that's gathered here before me, it's proverbially preaching to the choir. I think all of us that are gathered here today know that, and we hold that in our hearts and how important that is, to be real and true and good members of our community. So I thank you all for that, and I celebrate you all for that, because you're making a very big stand here today, and as I said before, it really warms my heart. So thank you all for being here today. With that said, I'd like to call up to the podium our first speaker. Before I call Danny, I'd like to call the mayor just for a brief welcome from the city to all of you here today. Mayor?
Hello, everybody. I want to, on behalf of the city, welcome everybody here. I hope we can get some humor out of this, because I have a little story. We were doing the WBIA special. We were doing interviews, and we're getting called in. So I'm in the middle of my interview, and Mike calls me and he says, "Man down. Christopher Columbus is down." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me! This is not happening right now, right?"
Yeah, speak into it closer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we
Get that story.
You gotta tell it again.
So well, I'll tell it again. So anyway, right, we're in the middle of our interviews for WVIA special, right? And I get a phone call from Mike, and he says that Christopher Columbus is down. I said, "You got to be kidding me! What do you mean?" Somebody crashed into the Columbus statue. I was like, "Oh." So right in the middle of the interview, I leave and we come right down here and we start working on it. And I think that this was actually a blessing because he looks just as good as the first day he came out here. I think he looks better right now, and I think he needed a little cleaning. And look at it actually got us all back together again. We haven't had a crowd like this in ages, and this is a beautiful day. It's a beautiful pillar for our community. He's been here for so long, and I'm glad he's back. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Representative Carroll, brief remarks to the crowd.
Thank you, Michael. I'll simply say thank you all for being here today to celebrate this special occasion. As we celebrate numerous holidays throughout the year, this holiday, just like all the others, is critically important to people of Italian American heritage. I'm thrilled with the new statue, and I'm thrilled that this opportunity was given to me. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for your continued support of the City of Pittston. As promised, I'd like to call up my colleague on City Council, Councilman Dan Argo. Dan?
Well, this is absolutely fabuloso. Che belle giornate la città di Pittston. Now let me tell you something. I grew up right over here in Oregon. Back in the 50s and 60s, it was totally different. There was no Kennedy Boulevard. And this area back here was full of Italian immigrants. I mean, my grandparents came from Sicily. My mother later came from Italy. But the area was an ethnic island, actually. So was the other side of Main Street, filled with Italian immigrants. And Jody Brogna, I see him out here, his grandmother had a store on Elizabeth Street. Didn't speak any English, but they could do business, let me tell you. Couldn't cheat her a penny. Matter of fact, no, I better not say it. Anyway, in my house, and in all my friends' house, Columbus was a hero. You know, the immigrants looked at him as their inspiration. The trip wasn't easy to make in those days. You know, they had the common saying, "Oh, we came over on the banana boat." Well, you know, in a lot of cases it was. They were in the like a dungeon in the hull of the ship, and the ship was carrying cargoes. I mean, so they looked at Columbus and said, if he could do what he did, we could do what we're going to do. We're going to make it to America, and we're going to establish ourselves and our families. And Pittston is a great example of that. I mean, we have big cities where there's very large Italian-American populations, but Pittston, on a smaller basis, was a very good image of that, because the Italians were such hard-working people. And after the mines shut down, they established dress factories. Remember all the dress factories? I think every one of them was owned by an Italian, right? We had Chandra, we had Chiarelli, we had all kinds of Bella Dress Company, and the Italians worked in the dress factories, and they made it quite prosperous. Quite prosperous. The goods were shipped to New York and distributed throughout the whole country. But Columbus exemplified Italian pride. Now, in those days, there were lots of Italian societies that evolved from the immigrants, and they got together and said, we want to draw honor to Columbus. So the first thing they worked on was changing the street here. It was Railroad Street. They changed it to Columbus Avenue. That was in around 1959, but at that point, they knew they were going to put a monument of Columbus somewhere down here. And after they got the plans from the redevelopment, because that was going to happen, and that's when they put Kennedy Boulevard in and changed Pittston completely. But they decided then they were going to erect a statue of their patron, Christopher Columbus. So the societies all got together, they band together, and they picked a committee to raise funds. Now I'm gonna mention the names of those societies here. They're on the statue, on the plaque, but it was the Amore Fraterno Society, Grote Society, Montedoro Society, Mother of the Rosary, St. Rocco's Mutual Aid Society, San Cataldo. We got a very large group of them right here. That is beautiful. And we got the Montedoros too over there. Viva! Rocco Muto, Viva la Bedamata del Rosario, right. Rocco Muto and Sarah DeFalco. They all got together and they formed a committee for fundraising, and that was Dr. Vincent Galizzi, Attorney Charles Buffalino, William Medico, Joey I. Infantino. We all remember him. He was a hero in the Italian community. Joey I. Had a lot to do with getting this thing done here. Frank Castellino, Michelangelo Sperazza, Michael Ferraro, and Pat Solano, who is here with us today. And may I say, Pat is the only one who is still with us from that committee. We're going to hear from him in just a little bit. So, always be proud when you pass by this monument, and remember, it's an honor to the Italian people who came to this country, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your parents. It's truly an honor, and it's so wonderful and beautiful to have this statue back to it, even better than what it was before. It was because of tremendous planning that the city initiated. And you see what the finished product is, and I hope it's here to, forever. Okay, now, we were talking about the Italian societies, and they had many processions through the streets down here. And right now we're going to have Paci's band play one of the premier Italian symphonies, I will call it, that was used in the processions. So, Paci's band is going to play a song called Caderna, okay? Jackie Brogan, take it away.
Let that flag fly, man.
Viva la bella madre del Rosario! Yeah, good old St. Rocco's. That was it. Okay. Well, again, I want to say thank you to everybody. It's so overwhelming today that I think I'm in heaven. But, don't forget that when we're done here, the Knights of Columbus welcomes everyone for a brunch. So we'll see you there. And right now, I'm going to turn the program back to Councilman Lombardo. Ciao.
Thank you, Dan. We all appreciate your heartfelt remarks. Next, I'd like to call up to the podium, as I indicated before, a former council member here in the city of Pittston, proud resident of the city, a member of many of our community groups, Maria Caparella Montante. Maria?
Good morning, one and all, or good afternoon. It's afternoon now. A few minutes ago, the sun was not out, and I was going to say, no matter if the sun isn't shining, it's shining in our hearts, because today we are rededicating our statue. What a great honor for us to be able to do that this morning. A few weeks ago, I was at Quinn's Market, and I met Danny Argo, and he said to me, Maria, we're going to rededicate the statue in October. And I says, oh, Denny, that's wonderful. I want to be on that program. He said, I'll see what I could do for you, Maria. So a week later, he calls and he says, the committee met, and sure enough, you're on. Thank you, Danny. But what I wanted to do today, all my life, and that's a fact, all my life there has been a statue of Christopher Columbus in this town. And I remember as a little girl, my father and all the Italian men were dressed to the nines in a three-piece suit, a white shirt and the shoes that were polished, and their Stetson hats, and away they went to the ceremony in the afternoon. In the evening, a big banquet at the Mayfair Supper Club, and that was the banquet where everyone went, all nationalities. And I can remember Papa getting so excited when they were going to have an Italian speaker. And the one that comes to my mind is Judge Pinola. Well, he was quite the figure in those days. So anyway, the tradition went on, and we learned the value of Columbus, his dedication, his will to discover, and he never let go. And that was a thing that they instilled in us, okay? They were so proud that he was an Italian, he was their countryman, but they were prouder still that he discovered America, their new home, and they were adapting to it beautifully. Now, there was a statue on South Main Street at the Roosevelt School, and it was enclosed with an iron gate, and it was there, it seemed, for a long time, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. And no one had the answer to why that statue disappeared. And some said it was the coal company wanted the land back, there was a subsidence, but we just didn't know. So for a few years, there was no Columbus statue. And then, again, he reappeared. And I asked Mr. Sam Zanta, who never ever missed a ceremony. And in his later years, he would stand across the street and just watch. And so one day I said to him, Sam, please tell me the story of the statue. And he said to me, well, he said, it's funny. Mr. Charlie McCarthy, who was the city historian, was in my shop having a haircut. And he said to me, Sam, the redevelopment has gone through Pittston. And that corner on Main Street, facing Railroad Street, is an ideal location for Christopher Columbus. And he says, you know, I called Dr. Vincent Galizzi, and he thought the idea was great too. And then he, in turn, called Mr. William Medico, and he thought it was great too. And so the ball began to roll. Mr. Medico was named chairman of the affair, and within a day he had raised $3,000 for the statue, and within a month they had $5,000, the amount that was needed for the statue. Then the plans began. They commissioned a sculptor. He had to find the right piece of stone. They had to okay the drafts. And so it took 2 years before it was finally completed. When it was completed, it was put on a cargo ship and delivered to the United States. And I thought, wow, wasn't that phenomenal that once again Christopher Columbus was sailing the Atlantic Ocean, coming to a land that he had discovered, because now Christopher Columbus is a real person to us. He's not a statue. He's very meaningful to us. And I thought, how wonderful, again, he had that opportunity. So when he arrived at the docks of New York, Mr. Medico sent the trucks out, and they delivered him here, and he was placed in his place of prominence, covered. When he was uncovered, can you imagine the enthusiasm, the love that was shown? And there he was standing on a tall podium, and he looked to us 20 feet tall, but actually 8 feet tall, and his left hand placed on an anchor, denoting that he was a navigator, he was a sailor. In his right hand are scrolls, and I thought, well, maybe those are the charts he used to chart his way across the Atlantic. And then again, they could have been the commission from Queen Isabella, who had the foresight to say, yes, Christopher, I'll give you those 3 ships. And here we are today. Now, when they uncovered the plaque, or the statue, now you've heard some of this before, but I just want to read this to you.
Yeah.
The bronze plaque inscription reads, the officers, members, and friends of the Columbus League of Luzerne County met with appropriate ceremonies on October 2nd, 1969, dedicated this statue to all whoever lived and worked in Greater Pittston community and who contributed so greatly in the first half of the 20th century to the growth and progress of this city. Committee members were Dr. Vincent Galizzi, Attorney Charles Buffalino Jr., Michelangelo Sperazza, Charles Junta, Patrick Solano, who is still here with us, and we thank you, Mr. Solano, Attorney Gifford Capolini, Frank Castellino, Albert Malone, Michael Ferrara, William Medico, Angelo Agnizio, Patsy Aquilina, Joseph Bergio, Anthony Campitano, Dino Shavaki, Carmel Falcone Sr., and Carmen is here today, Angelo Fiorani, Joseph Infantino and his family is here today, Joseph Pupa, Anthony Recupero, Nello Rossetti, Frank Roman, Leo Valenti, Angelo Zanta, and of course, Mr. Sam Zanta. The Italian societies that contributed were the Amore Fraterno, Grotte Montadoro, Mother of the Rosary, Raccomuto, St. Rocco, St. Cataldo, and Sierra de Falco. And again, I have to tell you that on the left side of the base of the statue reads, "The statue replaces an earlier statue of Christopher Columbus, upon which appeared the following inscription. Erected by the initiative of the Christopher Columbus Beneficial Society, which contributed from the Italian-American citizens of Pittston and vicinity in AD 1929. The names inscribed are Salvatore Buffalino, Vito Bianco, Michele Loquasto, Joseph Guarnieri, Raphael Antonello, and Attilio Zambetti." Now I read those names because they're with us today. They were part of bringing the statue to us, and not because he was just a statue, but what he represented to him, the symbolism of it all, the new land. They came here just like their ancestors did. Some, they brought their families, others came alone, and as Danny said, it was not an easy trip. So after the Columbus League dwindled, like everything does in life, then the next generation stepped up, and that was the Italian-American Association of Luzerne County. And they continued the tradition of coming to the statue, laying the wreath, and the tradition of the banquet. Later, we established an Italian Mass at St. Rocco's, and after Mass, again with the Paci Band, they followed behind us, and we in the front marched from the church to the statue, again to honor our patron. So that is something that is so instilled in us. I just want to say how grateful I am about Mr. Columbus discovering America. It was something that we did not learn in the history books. It was something that was taught to us by our parents, and they respected Columbus as a countryman, but they also respected the fact that he discovered this great land where they were now making their homeland, where they were raising their family, where there was the opportunity for a better life. And so those are the things that were instilled in us. And I just want to say in closing this. In life, everything changes. And life goes on. And at this point in time, we've reached that point again where this generation is getting tired, and we need the next generation to pick up the banner and to run with it. We need for you to keep our traditions alive. And I hope that that will happen, that Christopher will always be honored long after we're gone. And we leave it up to the next generation. And I say thank you for allowing me to be here this afternoon. This is so special to me, and I know it is to you too. God bless you all.
Thank you, Maria. We certainly appreciated that walk through history so we can understand what the true meaning is behind the statue and why it's so important for so many of us gathered here today. And we certainly hear your call to pick up the torch from prior generations and honor the traditions. In fact, I see many young people, particularly in the Browntown Club, here before me today, and I believe that we'll be gathered here for many years to come. And I can certainly say on behalf of this council that this statue won't be going anywhere, ever. So I can assure you of that. Before we call up our final speaker, Mr. Solano, I'd like to call on the Pachi's Band for another musical selection, please. Thank you. It was wonderful. I'd like to call to the microphone for some remarks to the crowd, Judge Agello. Judge.
Thank you, Mike. I want to thank Mike and the entire committee and the city officials for doing a great job in restoring the statue and with this ceremony. Didn't they do a terrific job? Columbus Day, as we know, although we've highlighted Italian-American heritage, Columbus Day, as we know, is a national holiday, a day for all Americans. And Theodore Roosevelt, speaking on this occasion, said, "There are no hyphenated Americans, there are only Americans. And they're only Americans that shed their blood and protected this country," so let's remember those men and women today. There are those who serve us as first responders, police officers. Let's remember them today, because today is a truly American day. This day is not celebrated in Europe. It is celebrated in the United States and in many of the countries of the new world, the new world that he discovered. So we say, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the world has never been the same since. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge, for those poignant remarks. Our final speaker this afternoon, as has been indicated by some of the previous remarks, Mr. Pat Solano, one of the remaining members of the committee that gave us this beautiful statue here in downtown Pittston. Mr. Solano is well known to those of us in the greater Pittston community, and we're very happy that he's joined us today. And I'd like to call him to the microphone for some remarks. Thank you.
In case all of you wonder that you don't know who I am, I knew your fathers and your mothers. Let me say, I listened to Danny and Marie, and I loved her father. When I listened to them, they gave a good recitation of the little bit of the history. But you know, there was a lot of humor to this. And the thing I'd like to say first is the Lord be good to all of those people that are no longer with us. They were a great group of people, great individuals who always had the best in their heart for everyone. And what came with that was a lot of humor also, besides all the pomp and the glory of Columbus. Danny Argo made a nice speech about Oregon. But he didn't know, because he wasn't here. It took us 6 weeks to decide which way to face the statue. Because nobody in Oregon wanted his back turned to them. This is God's gospel truth. I can tell you all kinds of stories. Nobody here to say that this is not right. But when we did the Columbus League with Dr. Galizzi, and she mentioned that, I always loved the way the old Italian guys did things, where everybody is going to have a voice in everything. They do it the democratic way. Everybody got to participate. And when we had the meeting, Dr. Galizzi said, we're going to have the meeting, and where do you think we should have the dinner? Michelangelo got up and said, Doctor, we got to have the dinner at the Mayfair Supper Club because Sam Capone is Italian. And Dr. Galizzi said, please, somebody else got a different suggestion. I want everybody to participate. Somebody think we should do this someplace else. How about the host? How about these different places? Nobody said anything. What do you think we should have for the menu? Michelangelo gets up and said, we got to have a turkey, or we can't have a chicken, either way. But I think we got to have the turkey. Dr. Galizzi said, how about beef? Maybe we want beef. How about maybe fish? Please, everybody got to have a voice in this. Nobody said nothing. Then he said, how much you think we should charge for this? Michelangelo got up and said, right off the bat, he had a big baritone voice, like, you know, but he got up and he said, I think we got to charge you $5, because everybody work in the mines and nobody got lots of money. How about 6? Galizzi goes, please, everybody got to have a voice in it. We got to do this a democratic way. How about 6? Maybe 7. Nobody said nothing. And then Galizzi gets up, he's sitting down, and said, please, nobody move. Frank Scordato going to pass out the tickets. But there were a great bunch of people, and I think Marie and Danny did service to all of them. I loved them all. And you learned. I was a young guy then, maybe in my 30s or 40s. They were all 5, 10 years older than me, but you learned from them, and they had values and principles that'd be nice if all the kids today had the same values and principles. And I thank you very much for inviting me, Mike, and God bless all of you guys.
So true. Thank you, Mr. Simone. We've come to the conclusion of our program, and I'd like to call to the microphone Ms. Letteretti, the president of the Italian American Association. She'd like to say a few remarks to the crowd. And we also have our wreath here to my right, which the Italian American Association, as is the tradition, will place at the foot of the statue.
Good afternoon. I'm Maureen Letteretti. I'm president of the Italian American Association. On behalf of our group, we'd love to thank the Pittston officials for the wonderful job they did in bringing back Christopher Columbus to his righteous place here in Pittston. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.
I could call some members of the Italian American Association up here to the stage to take the wreath and place it at the foot of the statue. And I'd like to again remind everyone, while we're waiting, there will be a reception at the Knights of Columbus Hall on Main Street, immediately concluding today's proceedings. So we'd like everyone to join us and continue our Columbus Day celebration. How about a round of applause for the Italian American Association for providing such a beautiful wreath? At this time, I'd like to call to the microphone for our benediction, Father Pietro, who I believe is the chaplain for the Knights of Columbus. Is that correct? Yeah. Correct. Okay. Father, if you would lead us in prayer. And at the conclusion of the prayer, I'd like the Paci's band to lead us out.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Buona domenica. Come va? Bene, bene. Christopher Columbus was a great navigator, but he was also a great man of faith. He stands as a symbol now to everyone in the greater Pittston area of progress, industry, and goodwill. And so let us now pray. O God, giver of all good gifts, who bestow upon your children peace and hope, inspire us this day and every day under your fatherly care to welcome all into our midst, to treat them with kindness and mercy and forgiveness. May we share the faith that we have received from our fathers, and may we always be people of true charity. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Councilman Argo is going to come up and introduce the final song, and at this time I would like to thank everyone for coming out today and celebrating Columbus Day with the City of Pittston. We're certainly grateful for you all being here and taking time out of your Sunday. Dan?
Okay, this next song that Paci's band is going to play used to be the song they always played at St. Rocco's when they took out the Saints. Also, the song is the national anthem of Italy. And being our great statue here was made, sculptured in Italy, this song is appropriate. So Paci's band, let's do the Italian Royal March.
Don't you throw money?
That's first and foremost, we're a nonprofit. We're supposed to be involved in the community. That's the big thing, first and foremost. We're supposed to be involved in and a lot of young kids that are walking if you approve in your travels, right?
Yes. No.
That's right, tomorrow, let's do it.
Lift up, Dad. All right, we're cutting out.
Hi, Dad. Thank you. You're coming tonight? Yeah.
Boys away.
How we doing?
How you doing?
We weren't here.